This is an FOU Studios podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to GXP, the Geek Experience Podcast. Let's level up with some GXP. I'm the showrunner, Peter the Geek. With me today, I have GMJC.
Hey, what's going on, world?
Also, our local fantasy and Harry Potter aficionado, Brittles.
Hey, what's up?
All right, our guest for today is actually very, very close to me. He's my cousin. Nick is a huge plant geek who's working on as a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Illinois. He teaches computer science and botany at Eureka College. He's done research with genomes for chestnut genetics. He wrote a book in about the trees in Waukesha County. He is one of the best experts on plants and everything like that I know. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe I get to say Dr. Nicholas LaBonte now, right?
Yeah.
All right, welcome to the show, Nick. Welcome to the show. So, Nick,
thank you.
Of course, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. As Peter mentioned, I'm Peter's cousin. I guess, my professional life revolves around plants and plant genome sequencing and plant breeding and plant genotype. A lot of things related to plants. I do have my history. My history with plants goes back to when I was a kid too. And I mean, Peter can tell you there was one summer we started the goofy little business venture where we dug up small trees from the woods to their grandpa's house and tried to sell them.
Yep.
You tried to sell them?
We tried to sell plant weeds from the woods. It was
All right,
great.
wait. I need to ask, who is your target audience for selling the plants from the trees?
just people driving down the road.
Anyone.
That's hilarious.
We were going to set it up like a lemonade stand.
Yeah.
How
But
big
we
were these
never-
trees?
They were
Tiny. They were
saplings.
very small.
tiny.
They were.
You guys have a wagon and a backhoe, and you guys are hauling these trees through the front yard.
I mean, you're assuming a larger volume than I think actually happened, Brittany.
Anyway, back on topic. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah. We move on from this. So I've loved Star Wars and Lord of the Rings for a long time. I mean, I saw the Lord of the Rings theaters.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I, our favorite thing to watch when we were kids was a VHS tape that my dad made called Star Wars Greatest Hits. That was the original. It was the original Star Wars trilogy with the scary parts taken out, so kindergartners could watch it. Don't you remember it, Peter?
Yes.
You had to have watched it with us.
Yeah, I must have. Yeah, because the scare. That's right. The Han and Greedo was taken out of it because it was too scary.
Yeah, because Greedo dies.
Yeah.
Anytime where somebody dies,
yes,
that would get taken out. So the narrative was kind of confusing, but as kids, we didn't care about the narrative. We just cared about, the spaceship and seeing Chewbacca and all.
Yeah,
all the,
sure.
I had completely forgotten about that, Nick. Completely forgotten. All right.
It's just it's a good intergenerational thing.
Oh yeah.
My dad felt that he needed to make it for us to have I mean, Star Wars is pretty kid-friendly to begin with. I mean, especially...
Well, it is now that it's Disney.
Yeah, it is now. So we watched that a lot, and I mentioned to Peter when we were talking about the lead-up to this, one Star Wars computer game we had was the Gungan Frontier. My brother and I spent a long time playing other old Star Wars computer games. We didn't really have video game systems.
Yeah.
We would play them on desktop computers. I forget. Oh, what was the name? There was one.
You guys had Dark Forces.
Dark Forces.
Okay, I only just discovered Dark Forces about a year ago, and that series, leading all the way up until like Jedi Knight and Jedi Academy, or rather Jedi Academy.
Yeah.
That series is highly underrated.
It
was really good. For even now, I'm enjoying it. Like when I'm a console gamer playing like the latest AAA hits, I love those games.
Great, yeah,
they're so well made.
We've actually started to bridge into this right now. We need to make sure we actually label this what's happening right now because it's right about time. We need to geek out. All right, so continuing the conversation, we had Dark Forces, pod racing. At one point, I played pod racing so much. My mom begged, like, I was not allowed to even watch other people play that game.
Now, this is pod racing.
So bad. So good.
It's funny. Yeah, I was talking to my brother Dan about that phenomenon. One of the last times we talked, like how, I saw him at Christmas, and we were like, the day after Christmas is always like we would get a new computer game, and then December 26th would be like a lost day where we spent the whole day playing the new games.
Right.
And SimCity was the worst. And Gungan Frontier is kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was always my favorite.
Wait, I have to clarify. It's Gungan Frontier, right? As in like the species. You just said that it's similar to The Sims. They made a Sims-like Star Wars game with Gungans in it. No. Oh, okay.
It's similar to Sims.
I was about to panic.
Yeah.
No, it was like Sim, like one of those Sim Park, Sim Nature kind of things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And the premise, I don't even remember the whole premise, but you were building like an ecosystem on like some moon or some I think it was the moon. I don't remember. And you were a Gungan like agent, and you had to populate this moon planet thing. It was so ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a funny game.
Damn.
It was. Yeah, Peter essentially got the gist of it right. Yeah, the idea was that the Gungans were like running out of natural resources on Naboo or something.
Yeah.
So they're colonizing this moon that doesn't have any life on it. So you pick up after like the terraforming or whatever is taking place. So there's like an atmosphere that can support complex life, and you just you have like this library of animals, and you have a limited number that you can introduce. Kind of like SimCity, certain things cost more than others.
Right.
And then you have to and there's a Gungan city there too, and you have to balance how many animals or trees the city harvests over time. So it was kind of an interesting game.
I mean, I have to say, I think my cities never flourished. I was way more interested in having a lot of animals.
I have to hand it to them though when did this game come out? 2001 maybe? Like episode 1 came out in 99, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was immediately after the Phantom Menace came out.
Just a point of order for the podcast. Brittles today is our fact checker. She's going to be looking up some information that if we're trying to recall things.
Yeah.
She's got a laptop set up. So, Brittles, were you able to find Gungan Frontier's release date?
She's looking it up right now.
Oh, okay.
She's doing some typing. Yeah, oh gosh. Yeah.
That it's just amazing to me that.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, JC, really quickly. The Mowpers. Do you remember the Mowpers?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna go into it though. Like with a lot of video games, our favorite thing was to sort of use the like create a creature function and just mess with it to try to like make creatures that will like break the game, basically.
Yeah.
And one of them was what Peter described was the Mowper, which was.
I'm taking it this is something of your own creation.
Oh
right?
God, it was beautiful. Please, Nick, please keep going. It was beautiful.
It was a 2-foot-tall biped with no arms and like this kind of long tube mouth and eye stalks, and it was like a bright, like key lime green.
Oh God!
Uniformly bright green. It was an eyesore.
It was
frankly.
awful.
And it had so we maxed out the reproductive rate, and
so it would just spread everywhere.
So this thing would just spawn like nobody's business. And the worst part of it was it only ate very large animals.
No.
So it's a carnivore.
It's 2 feet tall with no arms.
So funny.
So if you've taken like an ecology class, you know this isn't going to work because large animals need to consume a lot of resources, so there aren't as many of them. So a carnivore that only eats large animals and reproduces really quickly, you're going to have a problem. So what would happen is we'd make these ecosystems, and then like after a while, you'd like introduce the Mowpers, and within about 5 minutes, the planet would just be very nice vegetation, but like littered with the bones of animals and like swarms.
That
of, like,
is great. It's like the plague upon your ecosystem. I was trying to say, like, just for a game that came out so long ago, it really took it in a bold direction. So to have so many options for a player to like design and create their own environment. I mean, all the RTSs from that time, the real-time strategy games, were in a similar sense. They like you had to build and support different life forms and foundations and this and that. But a Star Wars IP, you would never think that Lucasfilm would allow their games to go into like an RTS type thing.
It wasn't RTS though.
It
was like a sim nature kind of thing. So like when you're building this occult, like it was ridiculously well faceted actually. Like when I was reflecting on it, like there were some one of the plants bubble ward is what you made with it. I don't remember what it was called, but there was a plant that it spawned seeds that blew down wind or something.
Sure.
And so eventually over time, it would just die out because it would go off of the map because all the seeds just disappeared. But there were so many plants and they had tons of different critters for you to develop. And like, yeah, you could create like a full blown, like really cool ecosystem.
Yeah, a world.
Yeah. And then
you're building it on a moon.
Yeah. Right? And then you could harvest. I mean, it wasn't really a big full moon. It was really.
Yeah. It was an interesting game. Yeah. The plants were kind of tricky because there were like five of the plants or something could be used by the Gungans to make their like bubble building underwater. So you had to keep a lot of those plants around, or the Gungans would like page you like angrily.
Yes,
that's right. Would pop up in the bottom corner of the screen, and he would be like, "Oh, we need more bubble stuff, more building." Like, what's up? And you're like watching as your like precious bubble trees are getting eaten by the animals.
Oh no!
I forgot about that.
But
because they would also complain and be like, "We want a new bongo station. We need you have to like give them the resources for a fucking bongo station."
I don't know if you guys ever played this game. I had experience with a game called Pharaoh. I didn't play Sims very much, but I had this game called Pharaoh, and it was essentially world building in ancient Egypt, and I feel like all games followed this pattern where it became less about you building and supporting your environment and more about managing the expectations of your inhabitants who got mad at you. Because all I remember was a priest who would go around my town, and if I click on him, I could get like a report of how the townspeople are feeling about things.
Right.
And, like, do I need to develop more clay or have more water routes? And he would just like angrily look at me and go, "This city is adequate, but we need more festivals."
Right.
What? Fuck you, man. I don't have the money, right? I'm trying to get the mortuary up. Screw you with your festivals.
I ran into that with SimCity all the time.
Yeah.
Because with SimCity, there was like SAFE, like the Sims against it was like there were all kinds of like factions that people would like, come to you like, we need to make sure we have more fire alarms or something like that. You're like, okay, great. And then
it's just about managing the expectations of
yes.
this dumb populace.
I remember figuring out at one point, it was the dirtiest thing I've ever done, like to theoretical people. Because tax season always hit at the end of the year. And so I would have my taxes super low most of the year. Business would thrive, people would move in, and then on December 20th, I would jack the taxes up as high as possible. I would get a ton of money at the new year and immediately lower them again.
You're Donald Trump.
It was so bad.
No one ever put Peter in government, please. No one ever vote for him. We know what he would do.
I mean, kind of, yeah.
So anyway, back to your expertise. So Peter, you had wanted to talk a lot about like biodiversity in a lot of the science fiction stuff that we see, or in the fantasy stuff that we see.
Right.
In different games and IPs in general. I think actually I'd love to bring Lord of the Rings into this at some point.
Definitely, yeah.
So for instance, Peter, do you want to?
Well, it's
I think you wanted to talk about Star Wars in particular. Right?
That doesn't have to be Star Wars, but in terms of like with plants and stuff like that, the first thing that pops into my mind is technically this is based off of a fantasy thing, but it's not abnormal to see in sci-fi. Like these, you see like weird plants, and like sometimes it's just creative design stuff like that. But one of the things you see is like mushroom trees.
Yeah,
like those mushrooms literally as tall as trees with huge canopies. And the question here is based on your knowledge, like. I mean, the mushrooms we have here on planet Earth are, I don't know how tall they get, like an inch or something. Like they're not that big. Portobellos get pretty big.
On their breed.
Well, right, yeah, portobellos get a lot bigger, but most of them are, fairly small.
We don't know. Yeah.
What, like genetically, what is the circumstance for a mushroom tree?
Or fungus the size of
size,
yeah.
You should have your fact checker look up what the world's largest mushroom is.
Is
quite a bit?
Sorry, I heard something that there's like a. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's just I know it's probably quite a bit bigger than a portobello. I just know that that's the first thing that popped into my mind.
The world's largest mushroom is Oregon's monster mushroom.
How big is it?
1 moment.
Okay. Well, I mean, but like, so I mean, once we find out how big it is, I guess we'll figure out if it's like the size of a tree or something like that. But.
So mushrooms in general. So a mushroom it's the fruiting body of a fungus.
Right.
Really, the fungi they're more closely related to animals than plants, which was just discovered more recently once we were able to look at their DNA more. They're more related to animals. Anyway, so fungi mostly exist as this network of little skinny tubes called hyphae, and they might be growing in the ground or on a pile of wood chips, that kind of thing. So they're the feeding structure, the main part of its body. The mushroom's a fruiting body, so its job is to disperse spores to make
essentially
the next
reproduce.
Generation.
Yeah.
So mushrooms, the reason they grow taller is to sort of lift their spore-producing structure above the terrain so that they can disperse more effectively. Now, spores are really tiny, right? Individual spores are microscopic.
Right.
It looks, a puffball.
Yeah.
That's the cloud of spores. It just looks like dust.
Yeah.
So they don't need to get very tall because a little gust of wind will pick up spores, and they essentially become aerosols. I mean, they're so small, they'll kind of float in the atmosphere, and they can move a huge distance. So that's why mushrooms don't really get that tall on Earth, is because they don't need to. It's expensive. It's metabolically expensive. So a fungus would have to use a lot of resources to make really big mushrooms.
Okay.
And it has to outweigh the expense of making a big fruiting structure with the benefit of being able to disperse more. And the really big mushrooms I can think of are the ones that grow on tree trunks. So there's one that grows a lot around here that's called the chicken of the woods, is the common name. The Latin name is Laetoporus sulphureus.
Yes. I really love that you had that off the top of your head just now.
Yeah. Well, it's a bright yellow and orange mushroom that grows in the heartwood of older trees, so it's a wood decay fungus.
Okay.
But their fruiting structure, they don't look like a mushroom. It looks like, the kind of big.
It's like the disc.
Shelf fungi that grow on a tree.
Shelf, right.
Yeah.
It's like that, but a huge mass of them, and they can weigh like 20 pounds or more.
Wow.
An individual structure, but they have an advantage. They're growing in the middle of the tree.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be able to fruit, 50 feet off the ground just because they're growing in a tree. But they need to be dispersing higher up because their preferred habitat, tree trunks, is higher up. So they have, so they grow big. Yeah, I don't know why exactly they grow as huge as they do, but those tend to be the really big mushrooms are the
That's super interesting.
Grow on tree trunks.
Brittles actually, she has the actual height or the actual size of that largest mushroom. I saw her point it to me, but I couldn't read it because I'm too far away. But
yes, the outline of the world's largest mushroom, which is I'm probably saying this wrong, the Armilia astoye, which is popularly known as the honey mushroom, stretches 3.5 miles, which is 5.6 kilometers across, and then extends an average of 3 feet into the ground.
What the fuck?
It covers an area as big as 1,665 football fields, and it kills trees.
Wow. Oh, whoa.
That's armillaria, yeah. You pronounced it essentially right. Yeah, but that grows. There are probably armillaria in New York, in the parks, and in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So they are. So yeah, that size is referring to the underground part of the mushroom.
Oh.
The individual caps on an armillaria they're about 6 inches tall and 4 inches across. So it's a big mushroom, but you'll see them. Sometimes the caps come out in October. So if you're in a park in October and you see like a big ring of these 6-inch tall yellow mushrooms, that's an armillaria colony. Yeah.
Okay, so what it's saying is like miles wide. That's that network you were talking about. Like okay, I was freaking out thinking that there was this like massively like.
One
gigantic mushroom,
monster mushroom that's eating trees in our planet. So wait. I love that we're on this topic. Sorry, we were getting some distracting sounds, but so one of my games that I used to play is World of Warcraft. There's a zone in one of those games that has, like we see in a lot of the fantasy movies or in like Avatar, these tree tall bioluminescent mushrooms, and it adds to a really cool environment. However, it's interesting that you say that the reason the mushrooms don't have to grow so big is because their spores are rather small and they can be easily carried. So as long as they're somewhat off the ground, they can go off just fine. However, in this particular biodiverse environment, the land mass, it's mostly a swamp, and these mushrooms are growing out of a swamp, but they don't grow in the mud and the muck. They have to find a landmass to alight on, and it so happens to be a part of the mechanic of this game that the spores are larger because one of the quests I think is to go around and collecting them. Or if I'm wrong, WoW fans will come after me with axes, but whatever. But it's interesting to me that maybe in that kind of like a very obviously atmospherically diverse and divergent situation, where it needs to find better positions for it to spread and grow, and so it needs to grow taller and have more reach in order to get it to a bigger landmass, and because the spores are heavier too. So yeah, I find that as actually a really cool feature.
Yeah, that's interesting. It seems like they must have put a little bit of thought into it.
Just a tiny bit of research. I mean, mostly they're just trying to get people to buy their game, but hey, you never know. Yeah. All right, so very cool. Peter, there was other stuff we wanted to talk about, especially I think the viability of like one environment type planets.
Right. That was a conversation Dan, Nick, Nick's brother, my other cousin, and I had on Facebook at one point. I know it's something that Nick's going to have a lot to weigh in on. It's it's huge in Star Wars, where it's like we're going to go to the blank planet blank. And like the forest moon of Endor, it's all redwoods. We're gonna go to Dagobah, it's all swamp. Like it's these ridiculous, like it's so inaccurate. Like granted, like ice planets. I mean, Pluto is literally a freaking ice planet. It's a ball of, not pure ice, but it's still frozen. That makes sense. Mars is but even Mars has ice caps. So we wanted to talk to you about those single biome planets.
Yeah, it's interesting because the person who would really be able to answer this would be like a planetary physicist, because they understand, what the factors are that give planets variable climates on different parts of the planets. But within our own solar system, I mean, you can think about Venus has a uniform environment.
Oh.
I don't think there's a lot of variation on Venus between the poles in terms of what the climate is, but it is an extremely thick atmosphere. So I think it's conceivable that you could have a single biome type planet, but it is very prevalent in Star Wars.
Oh,
I think, and I would add to that you kind of have there's a dichotomy. There are the all one thing kind of planets like Tatooine and Dagobah and Hoth, and then there are the pretty much just like Earth planets, or pretty much just like California or the Eastern United States kind of planet. Where it's kind of like lush and temperate.
Right. Weather perfect always.
Like Naboo,
and
Alderaan.
Where you can roll around in fields 365 days out of the year.
Yeah, like none of these planets, like there's never like it's winter right now. They never hit that. Like granted, it's
they achieve that diversity in planets, but they don't achieve it within the planet.
There's never like we're going to go to the mountains on Naboo. And
nope. It's just like the rolling fields.
You want to go skiing? Let's go to Hoth for some skiing.
My favorite is like the lava planet. And actually, this leads me into the other thing. Like there's the lava planet of
Mustafar.
Thank you so much. Our resident Star Wars absolute king here.
That's me.
But everything is burning. How do people breathe this atmosphere or even live in it? There's nothing there apart from just like volcanoes.
Well, if I can add a thing, I guess Nick, please definitely weigh in, but I thought most planets, like Earth at one point was like a volcanic ball at one point. So it's just like the idea behind it would that if it's a new planet that's still very volcanic.
I mean,
but breathing wise, there would be so much. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be a ton of like poisonous gas in that air.
Yeah, there also wouldn't be very much oxygen.
Yeah.
Oxygen would be all locked up in combustion products, probably.
Oh,
sure. If it's hot enough to burn the entire time, the oxygen would all just be being used up in combustion reactions, I think.
That's not something I would have even thought of. That's a really good point.
Well, so my point here is in Mustafar it's okay because they kind of use it as like a destination for people to hide, and it doesn't seem to support its own life. But then take a look at Lord of the Rings, which you had said you were a fan of. And let's look at Mordor, where the representation of Mordor is this, and Tolkien describes it as like a blackened thing where gases issue forth from the earth, and it's all rivers of lava and fire. And yet it's got enough vegetation to support a massive army of humanoid orcs that pop out of the ground. Like what do they eat? Like each other, I guess, is the answer. But then like how are they sustained? What do they breathe? And actually, interestingly, I don't know the full legendarium of Tolkien, but there's one of the games, Shadow of Mordor, that came out a few years ago, and the sequel came out recently. Specifies there's a different area of Mordor called Nirn, and the character comments, "Oh, I've never seen so much green in Mordor," and the other character responds, "This is how the Dark Lord feeds his armies," or something like that.
Well, there it is. It looks like the IP was like, well, we gotta.
Well, I mean, that was the thing. The game had to like kind of retcon what Mordor is like, unless Tolkien's Legendarium did it otherwise. But
I mean, Nick. You kind of. I just want to make sure Nick gets a chance to weigh in on the questions you were asking.
That's my thing. What is the feasibility of this? You know, can an area like that sustain life?
Mordor as it's depicted in like the Lord of the Rings movies, and as I understand it from the books, it would seem like Sauron would probably have to buy most of the food for his orc army.
Import it.
You know, like think about like Las Vegas. Like they don't grow most of their food.
That's a good point.
True.
So they have it all trucked in. So maybe Sauron just has a good supply chain. You know?
I was just going to say, I now want to find the Lord of the Rings IP book story, don't care, of the merchants that are selling to Sauron.
And like what he offers, what does he barter in return? He's like, here's some pumice for your baths, and I need about 8 billion cartloads of broccoli to feed my orcs. And who does he do this with?
It would be nice if we had a scene where like Faramir threatens to like leave Minas Tirith and go like make a bunch of money as a gruel broker for Sauron.
Gruel broker.
I know a guy. He made a ton of money doing that. The orcs need somebody to ship in all that gruel and whatever they eat.
Whatever they eat.
And it shows them eating a lot of meat.
Yeah.
But
they eat bread. It is specified that they eat bread, and the Uruk-hai specifically do eat bread.
But they complain about it. I mean, in Two Towers, it's specifically, we haven't had nothing but maggoty bread for days, and the one's just like, why can't we have meat?
Yeah.
Like, all they want is meat. So clearly, there are farmers raising hundreds of thousands of cattle for these armies that are, hundreds of thousands of troopers,
right.
And they're selling them to the Dark Lord.
Yep. They're trafficking them in through Mordor, which has like declared war on all human races, but they still like rely on these like cattle raising farmers to speculation, of course. But yeah, Brittles.
So that makes the mobilization of Sauron's armies even more interesting.
Right?
Like if they don't even actually grow food in Mordor, like when they're laying seed. Even if they grow food in some distant part of Mordor, like if I remember right. The Sea of Ern on a Middle Earth map is in the far. Mordor is basically a square in the south corner of the map. Ern is in the southeast corner of the square.
You nailed it. Yep, that's right.
So, even if that is, they'd have to move it a pretty long distance. And if they're laying siege to like Minas Tirith, or even that's not that far afield, but still, the logistics of holding that siege when they don't, have a nearby source of food is kind of interesting.
It is.
So I think that's a fault of at least how it's depicted in the movie of Lord of the Rings. Is that Minas Tirith too is this giant city with a huge human population.
It's in the middle of a field against a mountain. Like there's nothing around it.
Yeah. It's standing over this like unpopulated plain of short grass prairie.
Right.
Like it looks like it's in Wyoming.
Yeah, it really does.
It's beautiful scenery, but yeah.
It's a
fantasy world.
It is.
We don't have to worry about it.
That's actually a really good point. But it is funny because apart from the Shire, I don't think we've ever seen like farmland anywhere in Middle Earth, which is I didn't even think about that. That's fascinating. Brittany did have something.
There might be some like half-assed farm fields in Rohan.
I guess, maybe. But again, that's short. It's short plains. So I don't know. Brittles, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, I Googled what orcs eat.
This is good. I love it.
Brilliant. Let's hear it.
Tolkien indicates that orcs are always hungry, and they eat manner of flesh, including men and horses. Mm-hmm. So I believe Sauron just keeps them hungry.
Yep, like ravenous dogs, essentially.
Wow.
And there's cannibalistic traits. So
when they attack, they eat the body. Oh, they eat each other.
Yeah, no, well, we've seen that in Two Towers when one orc kills the other, or Uruk-hai at least. He says, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. And then they tear in. They do the whole thing. So
after Osgiliath and all those other sieges, they must just go at the fallen victims.
Yep. Yeah, that's a dark place to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even realize. Oh, my God.
Also says that the leader of the Mordor orcs, correct me, because I only read the books. I didn't watch the movies.
It's all right.
Grishnaka?
Sure.
Yes.
I don't remember, actually.
I've seen it written also, and I would pronounce it that way. I don't think it's said in the movies or not.
Well, he accuses Saruman Uruks of eating orc flesh, which they angrily denied.
Oh, interesting. So Saruman has his own Uruks, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs to... Okay, all right. I see how that...
So maybe they're not cannibals.
Well, but Uruks are technically not orcs, so it's not technically cannibalism at that point.
Oh, so it's still flesh.
Still flesh. Just have like a weird elf man hybrid, right?
Well, I do have to say, I did not expect the conversation we're having with the plant geneticist to get into what's cannibalism for an orc or not. But here we go.
The roots how conversations go.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
Funny.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about the whole, realistically replicating biodiversity in imagined world thing when I was going for a walk this morning, and
just a normal Saturday morning thought.
Yeah, well,
I was thinking about what am I going to talk? But I was thinking, that fantasy worlds like Middle Earth have it relatively easy.
Yeah.
Because we kind of assume that they're taking place in a version of our world or something similar. So it automatically kind of gets populated with the ecosystems and creatures we're kind of familiar with. I mean, obviously, they add on some dragons and things that are outside of the realm of real possibility. But, I mean, especially one of the great things about Lord of the Rings is that, they talk about the different trees, the oaks and the different types of trees in Fangorn Forest, things like that. So, and Tolkien, like a good Englishman, cares about the trees and minds all this nature stuff.
Right.
Anyway,
like the good Englishman he is.
Yeah, but the in like Star Wars, when you're creating different planets, like it is. I mean, just think about the amount of biodiversity, like where I am in central Illinois. It's not the most biodiverse place in the world, and just how many species live like in my yard? It's dozens, literally dozens. And if you added up species that like occasionally showed up once in a while in my yard, it would be hundreds. And if you had plants, animals, insects, whatever, and so to create that out of whole cloth on a different planet is just. It's an impossible task, really. I mean,
massive.
No one could come up with the biodiversity of Earth just out of their imagination.
And then replicate it per number of planets that you want to feature.
Yeah. So I think that's part of why you tend to get these single environment planets, and in Star Wars especially, they'll tend to have like one or two funky animals that are kind of distinctive, like. Naboo, you have the Gungans. Well, they're humanoids, but they have their creatures they ride. A couple big sea monsters. But another reason that I just thought of that there might be so many single environment planets is that people just like seeing the space travel aspect of space fantasy movies. And so if you have to go to a different planet to get the characters in a different environment, it kind of helps move the story along.
It's certainly a lot more interesting than like Luke and Obi-Wan going into Mos Eisley saying, "Yeah, we need a guy to fly a shuttle a few miles to the northwest because that's where the next scene is going to take place," rather than like, "No, we need to go, elsewhere." I think that's the thing. It always serves a story purpose.
But he didn't need it. He had the speeder, and they drove.
They did drive. They did drive.
But
Tatooine's a desert planet. So. But I think you're right. The spacefaring aspect is really interesting, and it encourages. It basically encourages its own genre. Right?
Well, and it's we're breaking this down with a literal plant geneticist, but at the end of the day, yes, there's storytelling element behind all of this. The image of a 20-foot tall mushroom is visually interesting because we see mushrooms like most of us see mushrooms that are no bigger than like 6 inches, even though there's a lot more going on there. But visually, the storytelling makes it exotic.
Right.
I'm taking over the conversation right now because we've actually hit the 30-minute mark of our Geek Out session, which it flew by for this was incredible. So we're actually hitting the next segment. We're hitting the final 10 minutes of our show, where it's plus 10 XP. Basically, for the next 10 minutes, the three of us here are going to have our chance to try to geek out, pick your brain. It's basically you got to geek out, now it's our turn, even though we've all been geeking out this entire time.
Yeah.
It's just kind of specific things that we wanted to talk about. So, JC, did you have anything specific?
Yeah. Hey, I had a question for you. Have you ever heard / played a game called No Man's Sky?
you asking me?
I
Yes,
am asking
yes.
you, yeah.
Okay, sorry. No, I have never.
Okay. So I know very little about this, but it was a very popular topic for a while. The game came out, I think, a year or two ago. Essentially, a team of developers created a game where it was procedurally generated planets, and it was the scope of the project was massive. They said that it would take you several hundred years of traveling in this procedurally generated game to encounter another player or something like that. It was like,
wow.
yeah, because everything, just the astronomical odds were astronomical. But it also generated each planet's flora and fauna. And that was what was interesting to me. They had certain parameters. I'm sure. I'm from a game design perspective, I'm sure there was some way to achieve, like, it needs to be able to do this, and it needs to be able to look like that. But all the planets, interestingly enough, were very eco-diverse. A lot of them were like dinosaurs tromping through a jungle, but many times there was an area of that map where it was, the season changed and there was no vegetation, and the fauna responded accordingly or changed accordingly. And it's a fascinating concept, and it's even more interesting to me that the game tanked. Apparently it didn't deliver on what it was originally promised to do, and it was just not interesting enough. There was not enough for players to do.
Interesting.
So from a geek perspective, I'd love to pick your brain as to what you would do in a situation like that. Say your expertise was hired by a game development company that was like, we would pay you lots of money and we want you to be able to tell us like what would make this world interesting as far as flora, etc. What would you do to be like, okay, you know what? Yes, that's cool that we can procedurally generate stuff, but like, how can we interact with this in that kind of environment that would engage a player?
Well, in my own experience, I mean, like I said before, my favorite part of a lot of the games was, designing your own thing and watching it run around.
And if memory serves, you're also a writer, and you're also a creative soul. You're not just a scientist. I will say that. I'll say that pretty definitively.
Because most scientists are not creative.
Well,
clearly,
when my sister's on the show, she'll prove that not every scientist has a creative side. Love her to death, but
fair enough.
So sorry, I interrupted you, Nick.
Yeah, no, but that's all I really had to say is that's what I would think is interesting. As far as plants go, I mean, I think you could make the coolest and most interesting simulated fantasy flora ever, and that wouldn't necessarily be what made people interested in the game.
Sure, of course.
Most people aren't that interested in plants. It's just kind of fact. So, while I could geek out about how cool a simulated plant world was, for most people, that's not why they played the game. But I think having an aspect where you could make, and maybe not necessarily ecological monsters like the Mowper, but where you could make your own creatures. And though, I just thought of Spore. I forgot to talk about
Spore. Spore. Sure.
But that's kind of the ultimate. But that went down a whole different road.
Yeah.
Where, you can just, because you have such flexibility over the shape of the animals, you can just make really, we just kind of end up making like
the perfect being.
Creatures.
So I've heard a lot about this, but I've never played it. And for our listeners and not viewers, but our listeners who are tuning in, what is Spore? Like, what's a rundown?
So, if memory serves, the breakdown of Spore is it's the same creator as The Sims, but taken to the specific level of an alien species. You start the game off literally as a cell. And as you go around eating like literally meat chunks, your cell grows and you get more complex. You can add on to it. Eventually, your little cell-like creature crawls out of the ocean, and you get to continue to customize and get more complex as you take over or befriend other things. It goes to then like a pre-civilization level, then to a civilization level, then to space travel, and then it becomes like a space trading sort of game. It's interesting. But we spent way too much time just customizing animals in that game.
Clearly. Given your background and what you've told us, I would have never guessed.
Britt, you had
Yes,
something?
I just have a correction there, Peter. So
Sorry.
After the space stage in the game, you then go into the galactic adventures, according to Wikipedia.
So you
Sorry.
can.
Well,
you can-
Galactic
you can
Galactic
travel-
Adventures was 2 parts. You collected spice and battled or befriended everybody. Those were the 2 options. If you were an
Right.
herbivore, you befriended. If you were a carnivore, you attacked.
That's awesome.
It was great, but you also you had a character creation thing, and I'm never gonna forget it. I can't remember which of you was the mastermind behind it, but it was called The Perfect Being, and it was this.
This was my brother. This is just the epitome of like Dan.
It was so wonderful.
Please describe.
It kind of looked like a tree, but definitely wasn't. It was brown and lanky and ugly. Its mouths were on its knees, I think. And it was structured in such a way that it looked like it was constantly falling over. It was so funny.
The perfect bee.
That was Spore, though. Yeah. Brittany, did you have anything you wanted to pick Nick's brain about?
I did. As the Harry Potter guru,
That's right.
and in my opinion, the most popular plant in Harry Potter is gillyweed.
Definitely the most well-known.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
But my question is, and it's not on Pottermore, and it's presumed on Harry Potter Wiki that the drink gilly water has gillyweed in it, and but it's never defined. If you drink it, you don't grow the gills or anything. So my question to you as a plant expert is, do some plants affect the body differently how they're ingested, including eating versus drinking?
That's a good question.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. And they definitely do. So it's let me try to think of some specific examples.
Definitely.
Usually it's a matter of degree. So if you have a bioactive compound in a plant that's going to affect your body, if you make a tincture of it, like if you extracted it in water, that will generally be a much more direct and heightened effect than if you ate the plant. Because when you eat the plant, the active compound is, it's in the cells of the plant, and there's a lot of other sugars and stuff in there. So
That
your body might
diluted,
not be able to
essentially.
absorb all of it.
Right.
Yeah. Or some of, you have to digest it.
Yeah.
It might not all get absorbed. But in a tincture or an extract, then you get a concentrated form of the substance you're after. Like if you want to talk, one famous one would be cocaine. So it grows in the leaf. It's a naturally produced compound. It grows in the leaves of a shrub that's native to South America.
Yep.
The people who are native there to the leaves is a mild stimulant, but the cocaine drug we know is extracted through this labor-intensive process, including lime, to sort of chemically extract the cocaine. And so the mode you consume it in, but it's usually a quantitative effect rather than totally changing the action of the plant.
Right. I find that fascinating. I have personal experience. I was in Peru, and you can buy a bag of these leaves for about what is a U.S. equivalent of 30 cents.
Wow.
And
probably shouldn't do that. Listening.
No, well. Here's the thing. Over there, you're 100% right. They basically roll up the leaves and allow them to dissolve under the gums because it provides a boost of energy. It's very popular with the farmers and the field workers there. But the border control in Peru is very, very strict on getting on these bags passing through, because in America, in the States at least, it's very easy to get some of the stuff over the counter that people can use to make to dilute the leaves into homebrewed cocaine.
Right.
So it became a challenge for our group of idiot freshman university kids to sneak a bag out of Peru, and I was the only one successful enough to do it.
Yep. Are you just admitting to like some huge crime now?
I really did, except that there's no evidence because that stuff like died in my dad's workshop where he put it away.
Well, thank you for that piece of information, JC.
So we have a criminal on the podcast.
We're almost out of time. I want to make sure we bounce back to make sure we're back on Brittany's thing.
Yes,
because it sounded like in the Potter universe, the gillyweed tincture, as Nick described it, is supposed to be like less potent, when in reality the effects would have been heightened.
Correct. Well, presuming that gilly water is an extract of gillyweed. Right. In which case, it would be the opposite. If you drink if gillyweed gives you gills,
unless you diluted it.
Right.
Right. So gilly water does what?
I don't know. Ideally, it would turn you into a fish, right?
I mean,
but that's what gillyweed technically. It gives you those features, and if gilly water is partnered,
a specified extract.
So like if it's gilly tea is what is, if we're looking at it like that, then yeah, I feel like the effects would have to be. This is interesting. Yeah, you would expect it so that, I don't know, you get more gills, you turn into a shark,
or you turn into a fish.
You turn into a fish or something.
That's essentially what I'm saying.
What is the Potter gilly water? What is gilly water?
What is gilly water?
Gilly water is a drink that Professor McGonagall has ordered, and Romilda Vane attempted to
give
spike
Harry,
with love potion to go to Slughorn's
So it
party.
sounds like they tried to make it into a tea, but
essentially it seems like
it's breaking. You know what? Maybe just going on a limb here. Maybe the magical element is not extracted through water. The magic element being the there it is.
The gill thing. Yeah, that's essentially what I was.
I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Nick. Like, unless it was diluted, in this case, it might have magically been so.
Right. Well, we are out of time. We could keep going for another hour or more, clearly, but we do have to wrap it up, unfortunately. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Nick. This has been amazing.
All right, yeah, it was fun. And if you need more advice about plants and Harry Potter, Star Wars, or anything, or mushrooms.
I am sure we'll have you back.
We'll be calling.
So anyway, I think I leveled up today with the GXP. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure I did. So quickly signing off again, I'm Peter the Geek.
I'm GMJC.
And I'm Brittles.
All right, thank you guys again for listening, and have a good rest of your day. And that's a wrap.
That's it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to our show. If you liked Geek XP, help us out by becoming a contributor on our Patreon. We have bonus content, raffles, and more at patreon.com/yourgeekxp. Geek XP is recorded live at Face Off Unlimited headquarters in Astoria, Queens, and was edited by Peter Hargard. Executive producers are Joe Tex, Jay Painter, and Eric Robinson. FOU Studios is a property of Face Off Unlimited, LLC. I'm Peter Hargarden, the senior producer of podcasts here, and on behalf of everyone who worked on the show, we'd like to thank you, the listener, for tuning in. Subscribe to catch all of our other podcasts here on the FOU Studios Podcast Network. To connect with the geeks, follow us at YourGeekXP on Facebook and Twitter. To learn more about FOU, connect with us via social media at FOU Studios and visit us at FOUstudios.com. Boom!